thank you very much for being here. I am excited to talk to you about the subject of parenting and how much you want to create essentially an ideal childhood to the degree that you can, and how much you want to allow your child to be exposed to the realness of the world. And just to kind of set it up, the reason that I became interested in this subject is I think it was a conversation that I was having in therapy where I heard myself say, if I could, I would create a good situation for my son always. Like it should not be your goal to always basically put them in a healthy, good situation that's not going to hurt or traumatize them in any way. And then I heard myself and I was like, perhaps just going to this utopian ideal, perhaps that is a good idea if life was not difficult. And if it wasn't a certainty that he was going to deal with difficulty and needed to be prepared for that.
Yeah, I think the certainty part is important, because if you could be certain, yeah, totally. Why? I mean, that's the definition of utopia, right? Is it's everything's perfect all the time and you don't have to worry about anything. And so of course, why wouldn't that be the goal? But as soon as you introduce lack of certainty of that perfection, then you've got conflict. And then how does your son deal with that conflict if he's never experienced any before?
Right. So is this a subject that you have ever actively thought about within your family? And just so people know, you have a daughter. And how old is your daughter?
She'll be 4 next month.
Okay. So have you thought about this? And I guess I'm curious what your view is. Yeah.
A ton. I guess, well, so I want to kind of distinguish one thing. I can't remember if the setup said something about like the harsh realities of the world versus just the realities of the world. Because one thing I know I've thought about a lot is the sort of imagination, Santa Claus, the kind of things that you tell kids that you think are going to be fun things, and it creates the sense of wonder for them, even if it's not a real representation of reality. I thought about that a lot. I'm really fascinated with that topic. I don't know if that's really what you're going for as much as the harsh realities, things that you're sort of protecting them from so that they don't, have to deal with this conflict or that conflict. So I guess before I go into one or the other, did you have something specific in mind that you wanted to discuss?
I did, but I like the topic that you said you've thought about a lot, which is the fantasy elements that it seems like we all in our society agree that some degree, varying by family, of is a good idea. So I think I'd like to go into that after. My original intent or thought about the conversation, could be characterized with a simple example of like, your kid is swinging from like the monkey bars or something like that. You see that they're, maybe doing something a little dangerous. Obviously, you're not going to let them fall on their head, but okay, I want to know your thought.
Okay, I got to change a couple things. Go ahead.
Well, yeah. To what degree do you say, okay, let me put my hands out? And that's a physical example, but of course, it can go into the mental, the emotional. So that's my first intent.
Okay. Yeah, I have thought about that one a lot too. In fact, I'm building a swing set in the backyard right now, and I've been researching all of the appropriate underlayments and fall protection stuff that, of course, we didn't have growing up. Well, I don't know if you did, but I certainly fell onto hard surfaces many times. I guess the way that I tend to look at it is I don't like well, we did this and I'm fine. Like I grew up falling on hard surfaces and I'm fine. For one, I think it's just a bad logical argument. It's just invoking your own personal anecdotes and experience as though it can be extrapolated to all of humanity. Like I've driven my whole life and texted and driven, and I haven't gotten into an accident. Doesn't mean it's not dangerous and that we shouldn't do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm all for a little bit of bubble wrap. And I guess that's really the question, right? Like, what's the level of taking it too far to where you then are actually hurting them in the long run? And I think that sweet spot is the hard thing to find. My wife and I've talked about it a lot, and she tends to think if there's something that's sort of life threatening, like climbing up somewhere high over concrete where you could fall and hit your head, and it shouldn't be done, or some other precaution should be taken. To go with the physical example that you were talking about. For me, I don't necessarily see it that way. I think it's more of a numbers game, and I think the incremental um, advancements that they make in becoming more and more sure of themselves, at 2 years old, at 3 years old, at 4 years old, climbing gives them the skill to avoid those kinds of things in the future, to avoid falling if they're on a ladder or somewhere where there is a potential risk of death. Because I don't think that's a realistic expectation that you're never going to be in that situation. And so if the first time you're going up on a 6-foot ladder, 12-foot ladder to hang up Christmas lights when you're 30, and your parents never let you do it when you were 5, and you never really got a sense of balance and etc., then I think you're at a worse off place safety wise. I've got more thoughts, but go ahead.
Well, okay, so that's interesting. I agree with what you're saying, but it sounds like you started setting up what you were saying by saying that you disagreed with your wife's point of view that there should be a never do this level. I'm sure you do have a never do this level for something
Yeah,
ridiculous, but you're saying a 6-foot ladder, concrete underneath, is not so clear because is that what you're saying? Because
yeah.
they're going to be in that situation,
Mm-hmm.
and okay, wow. I have to take that in because I do not act the same way. I don't know if I agree with it. I'm intrigued.
Are you more
Um,
cautious, you think?
I'm sorry.
You're more cautious, you think, in
I am
that
definitely
situation?
more cautious. I might be wrong to be more cautious. It's possible I agree with you. I just don't know. I'm going to try to put myself in this scenario. So would I let my son climb up a 6-foot ladder and then just stay by and just relax or something? Well, as I was saying before, the answer is no, I would not. My behavior is
Right.
I would not. But I guess the way that I've been thinking about it without thinking too explicitly is that I will let him fall off the 2-foot ladder or whatever and learn that way that, ouch, that actually was pretty hard. I can imagine what it would be like on the 6-foot ladder. But then again, there's an age difference. He's more likely to just not know what he's doing and hurt himself. And I
Right.
have noticed him becoming more agile and able to balance. And I'm like, thank goodness I have not overprotected him because otherwise he wouldn't know how to be sure of himself and that it's also not the end of the world if you get hurt.
Right.
So I'm not sure. It seems like you've put a lot of thought into it.
I have. That doesn't mean I know exactly what I think about it.
Mhm.
Is why these conversations are great, because I'm fully open to having my mind changed. I find it difficult to change my behavior, even though Steph, my wife, for those of you who aren't you, um, will see something that I'm doing with Elise, my daughter, and I just do it sort of out of instinct or whatever, and I'm not thinking necessarily too hard about if it's something I shouldn't do. Like I would, like I'll spin her around, for example. I'll grab her by her ankles and sort of do a little one of those.
Uh-huh.
But I wouldn't do that over concrete, for
Mhm.
example. But I do it on the grass. And she rightfully pointed out that if something happened and she fell on her head, like she could twist her neck and like it could cause some serious damage. And I'll agree with that when it's not happening, and then I'll forget a week later, and I'll be doing it again. And I'm not sure if it's because subconsciously I've decided I don't agree with it, and I just think, okay, well, this I'm comfortable with it, so I'm going to do it,
Mhm.
or if it's that I just genuinely forgot the reason why, and I'm just not thinking.
I think I'm going to just go ahead and impose my thoughts into your life and talking about your personal behavior. I think it's because deep down you don't agree with it, and it might not be logical. I think it may be a subconscious disagreement because well, I'm taking it from my experience. When I have a disagreement with my wife or someone else, and but in terms of, oh, it's more of a correction than a disagreement, where she would say, you really shouldn't do that. And then I say, okay. Then I just find myself doing it. I think it's because I really don't see a problem with it. And I haven't taken the time to articulate why not. And
Right.
I might be wrong about it, but certainly ideologically or subconsciously, whatever the right word is, I don't see a problem with it. Um,
Hmm. I wonder, like the texting and driving example is one that I really do feel like, I mean, I don't know. I was about to say something, and Matt, maybe you're right. Maybe it's just that deep down, it's like you can see why it might be a problem. But you're like, no,
mhm.
but I got this. Okay, other people shouldn't text and drive, but I think I can do it. But
Hmm.
I've had some moments where I have been scared. Like I've been looking down at my phone and done something I shouldn't have been doing in the car.
Yeah,
And I'm like, Jesus, if there was a person right there, like, or a biker in the bike lane, like that could have been horrific. And
right.
I need to stop doing this. And then I don't. And I think maybe less than it being that I disagree with it. I think it's more that I have the fear, the risk taking, and the fear of the consequences is something that I think genetically, or the way I was brought up, I don't know. I just don't have super strong within me, so I can rationally, because that's what a lot of this is based on, right? It's like that you see like a kid being flung around, or they're standing on a swing, and it looks scary, even if it's not. And that's what a lot of parents react to, is this thing that looks scary,
Hmm.
and not like, oh, like we do things that are 100 times more dangerous. They're not looking at the data. They're not looking at
Right.
actual numbers. It's a feeling. And it's just like, I feel like this is okay. I feel like this will be fine. And that tends to be my MO, which is I think why I'm a little bit more loose with that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Yeah, does that make sense?
It does. It does. I'm trying to think if the two situations, like texting and driving, and then the way that you act with Elise, are parallel. Because on the one hand, I do think it is dangerous to momentarily lapse looking at the road. I think it's clearly dangerous. We both agree, while you're looking at your phone or something. I I definitely see, why a higher risk approach is a philosophy. You don't have to take it, but there's nothing crazy about what you said about the 6 foot ladder thing. I'd say past a certain age, you wouldn't do it with a 1-year-old, but
Right.
so yeah, I'm not sure right now what I think about that, but I also have a higher risk tolerance with Everett, where, like, for instance, I he likes to play a game where I like throw him onto the couch. I mean, it's very simple, but I'd go 1 2 3 and then I throw him onto the couch, and I will throw him pretty high. Now, why do I do that? Because it's more fun, and he often goes big, big, because the concept of big is his favorite thing in the world right now. And I'm like, okay, he wants big, and it just makes me happy to see how much joy he has from
Yeah.
being flung up in the air. Now, Sasha will often say, do not throw him that high in the air. He could twist his neck. And I can't tell if I agree or not. I'm often like, okay, what am I going to say? No, like, but I can't tell how I really feel about it. I think, well, as I'm thinking about it now, I believe that I do think it's worth the teeny amount of risk, because I believe that I'm pretty careful about the way I trust my agility or whatever it is, that it's at a high enough level that I'm not going to throw him like upside down. Now, could I have a momentary lapse? Sure. But I'm very careful. I think when I'm doing it, I'm like, do not throw him the wrong way. So
Right.
I'm just like, okay, I'll take that risk.
Yeah. I mean, I do the same thing.
Right. So do we disagree with our own behavior?
Oh man, it's tough. I know you and I are very similar in that we bristle at other people telling us that we're doing something wrong, especially like in a moment like that. I think, if I'm not overstepping into your psyche, but I think have like an authority, like, yeah, because I think we do think things out very well, and we do have a high level of confidence in our ability to do things. And so it feels like an attack of our personal judgment that we've decided to do this thing. So in the moment, I definitely get, that's my first reaction. If anyone ever tells me something, that's my first reaction is like, you don't think I have a good grip on the ankle? Like, you think I would do this if I thought there was any chance of it going wrong?
Mm-hmm.
And after the fact, I definitely recognize the arrogance of that statement. I've injured myself more times than I can count. I've done dumb shit. I'm uncoordinated from this moment to that. And it's certainly like I can easily see having to eat humble pie doing something, that I consider safe, and then really injuring her, and feeling horrible about it, obviously, but then having that "I told you so" hanging over your shoulder.
Hmm.
The one saving grace I have with it is that I feel like that argument can be made with anything. I used to play a game with Alana, sister, when I was a kid, where she would have to say something and I would say how it could kill you.
Okay. Okay.
For
Yeah.
the children. And whenever she would say something that like I couldn't think of, like she would be like, my big toe. I'd be like, well, you could choke on it. Like this, whatever thing. Well, you could choke on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you could, I mean, certainly there are things like, yeah, climbing a 20-foot ladder over concrete when you're 3 years old. It's a spectrum, right? I don't know that there's going to be a clear line of this is okay and this is not. There are always going to be things like we let her climb up to wash her hands in the sink, and she sometimes is like a little teetering there, and like Steph is okay with it, but she could fall over backwards and hit her head or twist something around. Like coming down the stairs, she could fall on
Yeah.
her head.
Yeah.
And then what are you going to question every, well, I
Yeah.
should have moved into a one-story house then, and this was so foolish. I can't believe we thought that this was safe.
Mm.
So I struggle a lot with finding what criteria we're really going off of. It's not like we're looking at hard data, not like we're looking at here's, hours per injury at this activity versus this one, and we're okay with this one, so we've got to be okay with this one because there's fewer injuries, per hour or whatever. So I feel like it ends up being, for myself even too, a lot more of an emotional decision than a rational one. And it is then based on like what we're talking about. Like I think if I throw him high enough, this high, and I'm controlling sort of the trajectory of his body and I'm standing here, like then it's gonna be okay. And you just are trusting that instinct. And I don't
Yeah.
know that there's anything wrong with that necessarily. I think that's what's happening.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything wrong with taking, I guess, what I consider normal risks, that parallel risks that kids are going to deal with at school when they play with friends. I mean, we don't live in a world that, kids always have a safety net. And so risks like, yeah, the fact that there's a staircase, the sink, stuff like that, like you eliminate things that could be fatal risks as much as possible. Right. If there's like a, missing part of the railing or something,
Right?
obviously that's not okay. But yeah, I guess I'm like generally okay with that. And it's probably okay to have the push pull of the partner dynamics between ourselves and our wives. Um, because yeah, there is going to be a moment where, you or is not thinking as much or is going a little too far with it or something, or doesn't realize something because, we're going to miss things. So maybe that's part of what, relationships, where you have kids, like the relationship part is a little bit of tempering of different perspectives. In fact, I
Yeah.
really do think that is the case.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, I think, a good thing, because as much as I want to believe that I've got perfect judgment and I'm doing everything thinking about it
Mm-hmm,
right way,
mm-hmm.
I know that I'm not, and I can get caught up in the moment. Same thing with Elise that you said with Everett, like she just wants bigger and faster and harder, and I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, great. Um, but I need to sometimes be the one to, and just about like some of this is also about us, right? It's like, yeah, we want to create safety for them. We want to do things for them, but we're having fun too. Like it's fun
Yeah.
for us to do this thing. And so that's part of why it's hard to have a clear head about what's necessarily safe in the moment.
Yeah. I was thinking the same thing actually earlier as
Yeah,
you were talking about the swing around by the ankles. Like, it's so much fun to see their joy,
right.
that it is a little selfish because it does have to do with the pleasure that I am feeling in seeing him light up and get excited and giggle or whatever. So that's definitely a thought. One other kind of thought I'm having that I want to pose as a question to you is, if we take the same philosophy, let's say relative to our wives, which is the one kind of comparison that we've set up here, we're more okay with physical risks. Does that then does it then translate to other types of risks? So let's say it goes to Elisa's dating. Okay, she's 16, 17 or something like that. And there's a guy that's an idiot. You're just like, that guy's an idiot. He is going to be an emotionally difficult person, whatever it is. Are you then okay with that? And would you be more okay with that than Steph?
Um, Good question. I guess I think the hard thing with a lot of these hypotheticals is that there's so much in the nuance of the details that makes it hard to make like a blanket statement. But I think my general philosophy is, especially at that age, maybe less so earlier, but especially post puberty, where really like the agency of your life, I feel like, 18 is such an arbitrary
Yeah.
as the whatever. I mean, you got to have something for legal purposes. I get it, but
Yeah.
for parenting, like as soon as they've got like that sense of agency over their life, unless they're gonna jump off a cliff and you got to stop. Like it's I think that's really important to let them make those mistakes, especially with relationships, because that's the kind of thing that, with the exception of like the fact that maybe bad judgment could lead to an abusive partner or some kind of situation like that, which is going to be difficult to predict. You really got to let them make those mistakes, I think, themselves, because emotional pain, um, I think it's a lot easier to bounce back from than physical pain. So I think it's easier for me to um, be okay with her making those mistakes, being there for her, being able to answer questions or guide her, but to not step in with any kind of authority and tell her to do or not do something.
I like what you're saying, and your philosophy is then consistent across years and across the barrier between physical and emotional. Um, but I would make a correction with the sort of quick statement you made around emotional pain is easier to bounce back from than physical pain.
I thought you might have a problem with
You
that. Yeah,
got
or
it.
someone might. Yeah.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say I disagree. I would say within a context where the emotional pain is um, is on top of a foundation of security. So if somebody has their heart broken, something sad happens, your
Sure.
hamster dies, whatever it is, and you are a securely attached person, you don't let it get into your psyche as it's because of me or some sort of really deep thing. Then I think it can be better than, of course, something severe physically. But even that gets, you really have to know the details.
Right. Yeah. No, you're definitely right. And I guess I should clarify. I don't see the emotional pain as not being potentially serious. Of course, mental issues can be very serious and can lead to serious physical issues and self-harm and all sorts of things like that. But yeah, I guess I'm thinking that's hence my comment about the hypothetical, because I'm thinking like of my daughter when she's that age and this fantasy world that I've created where I've parented her perfectly up until that point, and so she's
Right.
got this foundation, and
Oh,
so
I get it.
yeah, so I think of it in that sense. But yeah, I mean, and that doesn't mean that they're totally safe from any kind of serious pain, or that it can't break that barrier of the secure attachment and get inside and cause worse problems.
Hmm.
Um, I guess I feel like there's more, like a physical injury is a more finite thing where it just happens and then you've got to sort of deal with the aftermath. With an emotional thing, it's sort of a slow burn. People, hopefully parents or friends or whoever can get in there and help and assist after the initial whatever that trauma might be, or the ongoing difficulty of the relationship.
Mm. That makes sense. As you're talking, I'm thinking about a flaw of mine that I'm concerned about, which is that when people have problems, I love them, I want to fix it. And I often really just want to go in and fix it. It's my instinct and I often do it.
Same.
Okay, that can be a major problem because people need to learn to do it themselves. They need to make mistakes, they need to screw up, have their own experience and learn.
Yep. I would venture to say that's maybe the most difficult thing for collectively parenthood as a whole. Anyone who's a parent, I think that's maybe the toughest thing, is knowing when to intervene and knowing when not to. And it's hard to even from the very beginning, little things that there's no real reason to help them with this little thing or that. And I've even for me, and I consider myself someone who values that hands-off type parenting a lot because I want that self-sufficiency and I want her to be able to do stuff on her own. It's still hard for me to not just jump in and swoop in and help with something I know she could do herself, or I know would be a good learning moment for her if I tried to guide her instead of just doing it for her. Both, little whatever things like we're talking about, physical things, or let me help you reach this or fill up your water cup or whatever. As much as the emotional things, like she's frustrated, I just want her to not be frustrated. And so I'm just going to do the thing that makes her not frustrated. But I feel like I'm getting better at, and I think I'm trying to become more aware of it, which by no means means that I'm perfect at it, of that urge to want to just solve the problem and not have her solve the problem, which takes more time and it's more of a pain, right? Like, you can solve the crying now, or you can spend a little bit more time and hopefully make it so that she's got the skills to deal with this sort of frustration or what negative thing in the future.
So where does the learning take place? It's like it's not going to happen when the problem occurs and then I solve it. That's probably not the learning, or you solve it. The learning occurs when they do it themselves. They have an experience, and then what you help explain the experience that they just had with them, or work through it with them, and Socratically bring out.
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
I think the older they get, the more Socrates you can bring into the mix. But early on, it's I guess it sort of just depends on what the situation is. But and sometimes like Steph and I will try to do that, and it just isn't working, and she just will throw a fit for an hour about like wanting us to fill up her water cup when she's perfectly capable of doing it. And we actually just had this conversation this past, maybe even yesterday, about we also don't want to create an environment where she doesn't feel like we're there for her. And even if she can fill up the water cup herself, she would, for whatever reason, right? Like you or I were just feeling crap. You're like, hey, can you get me this thing? Because
Yeah.
and so it's a little bit of a delicate balance too, between that, wanting her to know like we're there for her with parents. If she's feeling crappy, like we can do stuff for her, and having her not whine and complain about something that she can do herself, so that she learns that she can and should do things herself when she can.
Yeah. So if ever was throwing a fit for more than like 2 minutes about filling up the water cup, I would do it for him. Mostly because I wouldn't want to deal with him throwing a fit, because it's very hard for me when he's screaming. He is just like, and I'm sure many 2-year-olds are like this, an incredible negotiator. I never realized what a good negotiating tactic it is to keep repeating what you want over and over endlessly at a very loud volume.
We should start trying that in our professional lives.
I'll do that in business.
How about now? How about now? How about now? How about now?
Yeah, it's like eventually you're just like, okay, geez. So I would just do that because I think, and this could just be my stuff, it likely is, because I know how much I valued when I was a kid, somebody just doing something for me, because it was so nice to just be taken care of. And
Right.
how often in life do people just take care of things completely for you? Like the moments where you go back in, I don't know, I'm just imagining like you go back to your childhood home and spend some time, and like you have the type of parents that dote on you and are like, oh, let me do this. You don't even have to clean up your dishes. I love that.
Yeah,
It's very rare, but in my life right now, but I love it. I want Everett to be able to enjoy that, but is that just completely my experience that I'm talking about?
Um, I guess I think this is one where I have an easier time maybe seeing the downside of that. So this is the kind of thing that I always think about when, you talk about, well, we've got this issue and that issue with our parents, and okay, so we're going to do things perfectly with our, because we know about all these issues, and we're going to be the perfect parents because we can avoid all these obstacles. And in doing so, you swing the pendulum back whichever other way. And now, because we were doted on and it seems so great, but then, maybe we feel like we could be more self-sufficient now if we didn't have that, then we're going to go the other direction and be like, no, you get your water every single time and I'm never getting it for you. And then they grow up thinking like, what an asshole my dad, like, how come they never did anything for me?
Right.
And so I guess I hate to like always say like, it's a combination, it's moderation, like there's some sweet spot in the spectrum. It's not good to be too far one way or the other. But with the tantrum specifically, and I think this comes from someone else reading parenting books and relaying the information to me. Um, that is, I think, one of the clear examples of if you reinforce the behavior, especially early on, by rewarding the tantrum, then that's how they get the thing that they want, is that they throw the tantrum, you resist for a little bit, and then you give them what they want. So next time they know they just got to outwait you. They've just got to continue to have a tantrum, and maybe this time you're able to wait 3 minutes or 4 minutes. But I think that's one thing that I have had a hard time with, that now I have an easier time with, which is she's just gonna have a tantrum, and it's fine if it lasts an hour, but she has to know that that's not the way to get something. If she wants to get the thing, whatever it is, she's gonna have to calm down and take a breath, and we can talk about it, and maybe I'll say, okay, this time I'll help you, but if you want me to do something for you, you need to ask nicely, and or do it yourself, because otherwise I feel like it's just going to create that pattern of expecting that doting all the time, which might feel good for you to take care of your kid, which I can understand that, and I feel that way too. I have to fight against it because I don't want her to end up growing up expecting that she's going to get everything just because she wants it, and that's hard. That I think that gets kind of to the root of your original question, which is that is the reality of life. Forget the utopia of not having scrapes on your, like, you're gonna at some point have to deal with not getting what you want. And I personally had sort of like one parent always giving me everything I wanted, and the other one basically playing counterweight to that, like not wanting me to end up, which I appreciate sort of both sides of. But I have had issues behaviorally and otherwise in my life where I feel like I could have benefited from having better coping skills over regulating impulse control and not getting what I want. And I feel sort of an obligation, especially because she's got a similar temperament to me, to teach her those coping skills more than I feel like I want her to feel doted on.
I love what you're saying. I'm taking a lot from it. And I think it's wise, because when I think about my own experience, I actually do a kind of little trick that is not gonna be able to stick around very much longer, which is I am more likely to give him what he wants. If he's just screaming and it's not something that he's allowed to have, he doesn't get it. So it's not like I'm a total pushover, but if it's something that's fine, then I say, can you calm down? Can you say please? But I'm more likely to very quickly, if he just goes, please, 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 just be like, okay, fine, here it is. Thank God we can end the screaming. But Sasha is able to dig her heels in and just be like, no, not until you do this. And it works and it's great. And so the trick that I end up doing is I say to myself, and this is subconscious, semi-conscious, I'll call it. Well, he's learned all those lessons that he's not going to get what he wants from Sasha. So I can just, take the easy way out. Not only does Sasha want to kill me when she hears that, but what it does, I'm thinking out loud here, is reinforce that you can just go to another parent. There's not an allied front, which, no, yeah, not a good thing. So, yeah, I don't know if you have any commentary on that, but I do find myself doing that a little bit, and maybe, I've come to a reasonable place with it just now, but it's a complicated thing, man, because Sasha and I are different people,
Yeah.
and she's more comfortable with that. Like, I have a lot of trouble just doing what you said that you do, where you're just like, have a tantrum. If it's an hour, I go, it doesn't feel good for you. You're going against an instinct in a way, but
Right.
I have a limit to how long I can listen to him in pain. Now, you're a more experienced parent, so it's been more years for you, but
Right.
my limit is can be reached. But I think a lot of that's my stuff. I think it's because I just imagine that, like, how bad it would have felt for me, and so, whew, a lot of stuff to
Yeah.
wade through during those moments,
Yeah.
the intense moments of screaming.
Yeah.
The kid is just screaming.
I will say that for all of the difficulty that it is to have these, not the conversation, but to have the conversation, to figure out what to do. It really, like, when I'm not in the thick of it, it really is my favorite thing about parenting, because it really does teach you a lot about yourself and make you get to places in your own life that, just sort of like having a partner, like, you just don't hold a mirror up to yourself in the same way as if you were by yourself or as if you didn't have a kid. And it sounds like Everett is similar to how you were as a kid. I mean, I'm sure, like, as the years progress, you'll see that whether it's more or less, but at the moment, it's like, yeah, it's hard to remember what we were like when we were 2 or 3. But as
Right.
they get older, you're like, oh, I remember being 7 and being told the no about this, and so I'm going to say yes because I want them to, I want to solve this internal, pain that I feel from 40 years ago or whatever. And I think that is, I mean, everyone's thinking about that, and as part of their decision making process. And man, it is difficult. And then it's your day-to-day struggles, right? You had a hard day, you're frustrated, you got to make a lot of decisions, you just don't want to have to deal with it. So even if I know this is not the best thing for the kid, I'm just going to give them this thing because I can't hear it anymore.
Hmm.
um, I think that's fine. Like, I think you gotta, no one's gonna, even if that's your philosophy, no one's gonna hit their philosophy 100% of the time.
Right.
um, but yeah, I think what you said, like, it's tough being, two, I mean, yeah, two different parents, two different people. You're not going to always agree on everything. I think what's important is, even if you disagree, to come to some agreement, because I think that it's important for the kid to have that consistency, even though grandparents or other people that might take care of them are going to give them different information over the years, and they're going to start to see, like, different adults have different rules and limits and thresholds for whatever thing they're willing to give them. um, I find that we tend to do that sort of subconsciously. Like, I'll start doing things that she does and Steph does, and she'll start doing stuff that I do, and sometimes we'll disagree on stuff, and we'll have to just be like, look, this is really important to me, like, I'm putting my veto in, like, I think we need to do it this way. And even if she disagrees, we'll agree that we're going to do it that way, so that it's not as confusing for Elise as it could be.
Hmm. Yeah, I like that. Um, so I generally agree with you. The United Front thing is important, but I kind of feel like United Front, but with room for some variation between the parents, feels good.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe you've thought about this. I'm just thinking about it right now, because I mean, in life, you can negotiate differently with different people.
Mhm.
You probably are not going to, ask one person in one organization and get a completely different answer. That would be dysfunctional. And hopefully that's the point, is that with parents, it shouldn't be like there's like a philosophical feeling
Right.
amongst parents, as a unit, that's different. But I kind of want Everett to have the negotiation skills to understand that there could be a moment where that allows a little bit of a variation along
Right.
what the answer is.
Yeah, I think I'm okay with that. I think with all of this stuff, there's a general sense of it being, 80% is good. Like you're not, I think for your own sanity, like even at the very beginning of this conversation, you're talking about like, if I could control everything and make everything perfect, like, okay, but we can't. Like, even if you want to do this philosophy 100%, you're going to have different days. You're going to have different tolerance for decision making and frustration. And that's got to be okay. And your kid is going to be the recipient of some of that. And some of it might be confusing. It might mean that on Friday, daddy says no, no matter what. And then on Saturday, he's like a little bit more flexible because he's, a little bit more relaxed or whatever. And I think that's just life. You can't beat yourself up for,
Yeah.
you know,
And I think that's okay. I think I bristle at the idea of the parent with the totally hard no on anything once they say no.
right.
I don't like that. There can be a total hard no on things that are like not safe, or like there's been like a tremendous amount of discussion and it would really show a kind of weakness that wouldn't be beneficial to them ultimately to back down on it. But I like the idea that things can change, not always in the child's direction. It can change in a way that's unfavorable to them as well. It can be they were granted something and now it's been ungranted. That's life too.
Yeah.
Um, so I'd like it to be, well, and it's everybody's choice how to present the world to their children, but there's a lot of subconscious things you're doing and then a lot of conscious. And I would say a way that we feel like morally okay with that, my word is good, but there are sometimes changes, which I think is basically, we don't like them, but they happen. I think that is basically a reasonable, a realistic, but good and moral code to live by. So I like that idea. I think what's important to be hard boundaries are, in order to provide your child enough structure that they feel a security in life, that, those boundaries are good, right? We all know that having totally loose boundaries or no boundaries means that the child grows up very insecure. So I think it's like, there are certain routines of life, there are certain ways of being, and those maybe customs, traditions, the child can rely on those. But someone's word being completely inflexible, that I don't. I think that's not part of that secure structure thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I agree with that, generally speaking. I think, like, it's tough too because things just change, right, from day to day and year to year. And it might be that dairy and eggs, I say might be like, I'm not giving a totally exact example of what's going on, but that dairy and eggs are, causing a rash or some asthma symptoms or whatever. And so there is a very hard no. You can't have a bite of this. You can't eat this thing. And then we want to just double check 6 months later because kids grow out of allergies and we don't want her to not have this stuff forever. So okay, today after 6 months of this hard no, like we're gonna say, yeah, you can have a little bit. And now what used to be that she understood that she just couldn't have it, now it's like negotiating with every single thing. And it's how do you explain to a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, like, well, we're kind of testing things every once in a while just to make sure that, to see how sensitive you are to this food. And so there might be weeks because you had this reaction that it's going to be a hard no, but then after that, it's going to be a little bit more, you just can't do that. And so a lot of these conversations or a lot of these sort of rules that we're talking about, they just change from year to year, especially as the kid gets older and has better language skills and can understand what you're saying and can process that there's reasons for doing things as opposed to just, it seems like this haphazard, I'm not getting what I want right now.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. Yeah, I generally like that. So because we just have a few minutes left, did you want to touch for just a few minutes on the magic
Sure.
part, the
Yeah.
fantasy part? Maybe we could just do 5 minutes on that.
Yeah.
I have not thought that much about this, and we're gonna have some decisions coming up. So yeah, well, let me let you start.
Okay. I used to be very much against like Santa Claus and that kind of stuff. I was a kid. I was the asshole who ruined Santa Claus for some of my friends, and they're like, "No,
Okay.
look, there's the red dot in the sky," and I was like, "Yeah, it's just an airplane." Like,
Oof.
how do you not know that? I got in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think I've softened a bit, and Steph is very much, obviously I didn't grow up with Santa Claus specifically, but I had the Easter Bunny and I had the Tooth Fairy, and
Mm-hmm.
we celebrate Christmas now because Steph grew up Catholic, and so I like the idea of creating a little bit of wonder and that sort of excitement. But I think, like with anything else, it really just depends on the kid. And if the kid
Mm-hmm.
is up for it, because I heard this podcast where they were interviewing kids that had very specific reactions to Santa Claus
Huh.
not true. And there were some kids who were like, "Oh, I love it. I love that my parents went to all, put out the cookies and took little bite marks out of it, and like it was fantastic." And then when I found out, like I helped with my younger sister, and it was
Mm.
this great thing, and everyone loved it. And then other people are just like, they lied to me, and I never will trust them because I knew that my instincts were this, and they completely like gaslighted me for years.
Uh-huh.
And that's the camp I'm in. That's the camp. That's what I relate to the most. Is like I would much rather, if I had to choose one, I would much rather be careful of ruining a kid's intuition and
Mm-hmm.
making them not trust what they think is true and not trusting adults, because that's a dangerous precedent to set where now they can't, they don't know what's real and what's not.
Yeah.
Um, go ahead if you want to say something.
Well, as you're talking, I'm thinking that is the camp that I'm in, but I would add the like strategy of stating unsureness, because it becomes very important to state, well, so does Santa Claus exist? I would say, well, some people believe Santa Claus exists. Now, of course,
Yeah.
that's going to lead to the difficult question, do you believe it? Perhaps Sasha and I would need to assign, mommy agrees, daddy doesn't, so that he could be like, oh, well, that's just an even split. I don't know what I think.
Right.
Because that prepares you for a very important questions to do with religion and God and stuff like that, whatever someone might deal with. And there's a lot of things that we can't see that some people believe and some people don't, and
Yeah.
our children will have to make decisions about those without being sure. So I like the idea of some people believe, and if they feel like having the moment being taken away by the moment, great. And if not, that's okay. But right, I'm starting to feel like I don't like the idea, just as you're talking, of um, stating something that's certain when I'm used to just saying the truth
Right.
a lot when I know it's not true.
I think that's the nail on the head. And brief aside, Sasha knows there's no Santa Claus, right?
Um, I don't know, actually. I have to ask, but I think she might still believe it.
Uh, yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. That it's, for me at least, I'm happy to kind of go along with it and play along. And if she asks questions that are, well, how does he get from every house, in the world, like in one night? Well, what do you think? But if I would never be able to just flat out lie and say, you know, because he's magical, or
Hmm. Hmm.
like I think I can keep, and this is what Steph has sort of um, turned me on a little bit, is that I can deflect a little bit. Like she can ask a question and I say this thing and then she doesn't ask again for a year or whatever it is. But she
Hmm.
starts to ask questions. I have this anecdote that I always tell when I'm talking about this. When I was like, I don't know, 7 or 8, my grandma, not Sasha's grandma, other side, um, she would like read the tea leaves we would have like loose leaf tea in like little Asian teacups. And when you finish drinking the tea, it would like have a pattern on the inside, and she'd read it. She'd like, oh, like this means this and this means that. And I was like, well, how do you know that? And like, what is this thing? Like, how do you know that this means this? And I was so badgering and nagging, and she kept trying to deflect and like, well, I just know. And that finally she kind of got fed up, and she was just like, okay, I made it up. Are you happy? Like, you ruined it.
Oh.
And I'm like, yeah, I am happy actually. Thank you. I'm happy like fucking thought.
Ah,
uh, and that's the feeling that I mean, and of course it's personal, right? That I would never ever want to make Elise feel or any other kid that they just can't trust their intuition. And I think it's the responsibility of the parents to ascertain when they're at that moment, when they're ready. Like, I think she should have known that clearly I didn't believe it and that I was looking for, I really wanted to know, like, is there something behind this that you're not telling me, or am I stupid? Like, why am I not able to figure this out? But if it's this fantastical thing and it's a story and like, oh, Frozen, like they use their wands and they can do, I think I just mixed Harry Potter and Frozen, but whatever. Um, like they can do these things and we want to pretend, like I'm all for that. I think that's fantastic. I just don't think, I think it seems like it's relatively obvious when the kid is frustrated that you're not answering their questions, and that's when you.
I think that's a fair degree of nuance to go to. It's like really see how much the child is enjoying it or not, how interested they are, how far you're wanting to take it, given that you're going to have to undo it later. Um, but I think there's more to think about here. And yeah, this has just been a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate you coming on and having a dialogue with me.